My name is John Passfield, and the title of this reading will be Pauline Johnson, Video 20, The Planning Notebook. This is my novel, Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. But in this video I'm going to read from the planning notebook which accompanies this novel. The title of the notebook is Planning Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, and it can be found and accessed for free on my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. It covers 4 years and runs from my first idea of writing a novel on this topic to my conclusion that the novel was now in rough draft form, which meant that every word of the novel was now in place and it was time to start the polishing process. Now, the novel turned out to be 46,000 words, and the notebook is 61,000 words. So I'm going to read 5 passages as a sample of what the notebook contains. Here's the very first passage, my first idea of writing such a novel. Just a thought. I've been brooding a lot lately about possible future novel topics. I do this a lot after I finish a novel. At present, I have planned a Glenn Gould novel for my next project. I'll take a month and write the Out West journal, The Making of Out West, and then start on the new novel, which will be Glenn Gould, Light and Dark, full time. So sort of 3 novels in my mind there. The Pauline Johnson novel, that was just an idea. The novel Cyril Passfield Out West, which I had finished writing, and I was writing a journal about, and then thinking that next I would start writing a Glenn Gould novel. Well, that is a novel, but it's not published, so I can't hold it up, the Glenn Gould novel. So my brooding is this, I say in this note: a Canadian icon trilogy. Now, a trilogy is 3 novels. Bethune, the only person alive in the world. So I'd already written that novel. That would be number 1 in the trilogy. Secondly, Terry Fox, Somewhere the Hurting Must Stop. Okay, I'd already written that novel. So there's 2 novels for the trilogy. And Glenn Gould, Light and Dark, I had planned to write next. I did write it, and as of March 2022, it's a novel but not published. So then I thought to myself, why not a second Canadian trilogy, Canadian icon trilogy? 3 novels on 3 females. Well, I thought of 4 possible ones. L.M. Montgomery would be a possibility, Pauline Johnson as a possibility, Susanna Moody, and Emily Carr. Now, as it turned out, L.M. Montgomery, as of March 2022, is a novel, but not published. Pauline Johnson, I just held up. That's the one we're talking about now. Susanna Moody and Emily Carr, I have done nothing with and might never write about them because I have a few other female Canadian personalities in mind for possible novel topics. So I continue on here. I've read their biographies and explored their work over the years. Each has a kind of mindscape which interests me. So that's the second passage, first passage I chose. Here's a second passage from a little later in the notebook. The home of Pauline Johnson, the main character of another proposed novel, is about 10 or 15 miles from my house. In one way, it's nice to be writing novels which are set so close to home. In another way, as I've said before, the heritage which I share with all humans is the whole world and everything in it. So this novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, which I was working on as I wrote this note, will be as far away from home and as close to home as my Emily Bronte novel. Well, that's a novel which I had written. Yorkshire is not my home and not near my home. And yet, if we share human qualities with every person who's ever lived, who lives now or ever will live, then we can write about people who don't live near us. So enjoyable to think that I could write a novel about a person who lived 10 miles, say, from where I live, Pauline Johnson, but not all that important. Emily Bronte lived maybe 10,000 miles from where I live, 5,000 miles, and that was fine with me. Okay, here's the third passage I've chosen from the planning notebook. Pauline Johnson, and I had no subtitle at that point. I later chose Know Who I Am. A question yet to be answered, the subtitle. I wondered from former reading, and I wonder now, with a dip into the biography today, what the psychic tone of the main character's thoughts will be. The historical L.M. Montgomery is almost a stage figure in her intensity, and this allowed me to present her in quite striking and distorted imagery, which I enjoyed writing. But will I see the historical, and in consequence the fictional Pauline Johnson this way? Will there be more of a, quote, lady under stress gets the job done, end of quote, with the main character Pauline Johnson, and less or little or almost none of, quote, lady holds the fragments of herself together while getting the job done, end of quote, as there is with the main character Ellen Montgomery, we will see. So two very different people. One very, very high-strung, Ellen Montgomery, and one, I think, quite smooth in her personality, at least as far as what she showed the world goes. Would I be able to find the imagery that the new character by which she thinks, the imagery by which she thinks? Here's the fourth item I've chosen, fourth passage. Last month, as I considered how complex is the 50,000-word image pattern of the Montgomery novel, which I had completed by then, I began to wonder whether I could get an equal complexity from the potential image quarry of the Pauline Johnson novel topic. However, in reading about the historical Pauline Johnson, my original thought that she would make a good novel topic for me has been restored. In her case, it will be a search for valid imagery with which to think. This is the topic of all my novels, of course, but her novel will be a fascinating variation on that topic, in that the imagery of her life and thoughts will be unique to her and to her situation and her historical and societal time. I watched a 1-hour biography of Pauline Johnson last night, and the richness of her experience and her creative reaction to that experience, what could be called true and false imagery, and in true and false action, will be fascinating to think about and to react to creatively in writing a novel on the topic of Pauline Johnson. Okay, here's the fifth and final segment that I lifted out of my 61,000-word planning notebook. One comment on the internet seemed to suggest that her life was complex and interesting. A self-made woman, a person of mixed race, a female in a male-dominated world, etc., but that she was a poor poet. I taught the book Flint and Feather. Now here it is here, Flint and Feather by E. Pauline Johnson. But I don't know her poetry in detail. I suspect that such a simple negative comment does not distinguish between, number one, her entertainment and her serious poems. She wrote both kinds. Number two, her occasional social echo topics and her personal depths of thought topics. So sometimes she was just saying what society was thinking, and other times she was saying what she was thinking. So there's two kinds of poems there. And number three, her adherence to the conventions of late romantic poeticizing, which was swept away by Eliot and the moderns or modernists, and the true poetry which breaks through this no longer congenial mode of writing. So people who wrote during her time had a different view of poetry than we do today. And we can dismiss the poems and say, well, hard to read and don't speak to us. Or we can kind of look past the outdated vocabulary, the falseness of some of the phrasing and so on, and see beneath it that there was a person there who was living just as interesting a life as we live and saying interesting things about it. But sometimes the style seems old-fashioned. But I thought I could get past that. I thought so as I was reading her poems, and I think I did. Excuse me. And now for a conclusion. Having read the 5 passages from the planning notebook, here's the note that I place in each of my planning notebooks, with the titles changed, but with the rest of the passage intact. Planning Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, is the notebook which I kept while planning, writing, editing, and polishing the novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am. It's an attempt to record, understand, and organize the vast cluster of thoughts which occur as one grapples with the various levels of organization which a clear yet complex work of art demands. The writing of such a notebook is an attempt to seek an ideal balance between the creative and the critical faculties by accessing as much of the territory of the subconscious creative mind as is possible. It is the invisible idea connections between the lists, the charts, and the prose passages of reflection that move the creative project along towards its goal, which is to produce the text of the projected novel. The idea narrative of the notebook is the force of a single idea seeking its ideal form as a multi-layered idea pattern. A sidelight of the notebook is the drama of the oscillating rhythm of puzzlement and certainty within the mind of the writer, which seems to be endemic to all creative endeavors. Taken all together, the 3 companion books, the novel Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, the journal, The Making of Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, and this notebook, Planning Pauline Johnson, Know Who I Am, are the record of an exploratory probe into the mysterious nature of creativity. And lastly, I will simply say that, oops, flipping my page here. Once again, you can access this notebook for free. Go to my website, johnpassfield.ca, johnpassfield.ca. Then go to Notebooks, and then click on the cover icon. Lastly, I'll say thank you for watching this video.